Okay, I'm not sure what's happened to Kimberly and Adele. I'm sure there's a good reason why they're not here. So I'm gonna stream a previous show that they did back in February that was particularly good. So here we go. I hope this all works. Hey ladies, you're now live on the website. So hello Adele, hello Kim.
Hiya, Jason.
Is that a video I can hear in the background? Has someone got YouTube running or the website running or something? I can hear background video.
Possibly on Kim's end, not
right.
on my end.
We'll tell Kim when you
Home alone. It's just me and you, Jason.
Oh, how are you?
It was
Don't
me.
say things like that.
Don't
Don't talk.
technical issues.
Don't talk. Don't say things like that. How are you? Anyway, how are you two?
We are good. We're well, Kim is exceptionally busy.
Kim is on fire. I saw a video of her today. I was like, wow, Kim, you've really like grown in confidence, and you're doing these videos, these Facebook lives, and I'm like, wow, where's it? What's Kim up to? God.
Yes,
You've discovered the go live button on Facebook, haven't you?
If I could do that for my uni work, right, I'd be a professor by now. I would.
Yeah, no, I put a post up today. I know Kim has been working incredibly hard on her videos. I know she's not, she's certainly, I think her mornings spent sleeping and she's awake for the rest of the other 20 hours of the day.
I'm even learning the Valley's dialect. I am. I can understand what she says now. It's fantastic. When I first met Kim, I was like, run that past me again, Kim. A bit slower, maybe, or I'd stop and rewind. What did she say? Now I'm getting tuned in. I'm on your wavelength. It's a bit concerning, but I'm getting it.
Yeah. Well, I'm even doing the subtitle now, Jace. I'm just a little bit behind on it, but they'll be subtitled by the end of the week.
Are we speaking Welsh next? Whatever next.
Are we live, Jace?
Yes, we are.
We certainly are live. Yeah.
Okay, let me get on here then. So I'm trying to run off the laptop. I'm getting quite clever at this, I think.
I can see in the chat room we've got Gwyneth. In the chat room we've got Gwyneth Chapel in the chat room. It's good to see.
Oh yeah, Gwyn.
And actually one of your team, isn't she? I think, or one of your people. So.
Yes. Excellent. So today's show, we're going to be looking a bit about the history of sex education, where sex education came from, the ideologies behind it, how those ideologies have filtered through, and the impact that this has had. So we're going to be looking at the past sex education history and how that is involved and influencing the current sex education coming into play, already in play in many parts of the world. So we're going to talk about that, but it has to be said, it is not easy listening. Myself and Kim, even though we know quite a lot on this, I know myself with each new name I come across, and it adds into my list of the next person that I'm going to research. You learn something a bit more shocking and you think, wow, how is this person, influencing still what we're doing now. So it does contain child abuse, which is very upsetting. To some of it's going to be extremely upsetting. There's a hell of a lot more I need to look at and watch, but because it's been so late at night, I've known that going to bed, I couldn't go to bed being after this stuff that we are learning. So we're going to talk a bit about that, aren't we, Kimberly?
Yeah, and I think picking up on that point there, that's why I'm awake working so hard. That is, it's got to be faced, it's got to be done, and you can't sleep off it. So I just work and work and work and work until I just drop.
And at the beginning, I became aware of Alfred Kinsey, who is going to be the main influence of what we're talking about tonight. Hence why when I first came across you and this, I was already aware of what this was about, you know, where this was coming from. But it is extremely difficult to listen to. And at the beginning, you might think that what relevance does this have? And I wanted to talk about it from the beginning, but we really needed people to see what we were talking about in how it's not safeguarding, how it doesn't protect. That was the main priority. But now that we're being told this isn't part of the global rollout, this, you know, there is nothing sinister in this, then we have to address the elephant in the room, and that is where our sex education is coming from.
Well, that's it. For me, it was just a case of connecting it to us. Once because I was already aware of this education, I never ever thought it'd come here. So for me, it was just a case of connecting it to us. And I'm not being funny. This is going to sound crazy, but when I discovered just UNESCO on page 4 of our draft, I felt like I'd hit the jackpot, and there was no turning back from that for me. Then when the All About Me package, when I discovered that was a United Nations package, that was it. I hit the jackpot. You know, to me, I thought then it was going to be easy proving to people. Then it was like, Scotland's curriculum, I thought, this is it. This is it. Now, this is all it's going to take. But people just seem to think it's devolved powers. And so we've had to try and drill through as much as we can of that. You know, because people are so quick to just say no, 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 you know, and like, well, obviously we've been hate campaigns and all sorts, but for us, it's always been about child protection and safeguarding. And it's as simple as that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the thing is, for me, when I first came across an article in 2013 on Facebook, I was told it was Jewish propaganda. So I looked into it, and that's when I come across the WHO document. And as far as I was concerned, this article was correct.
Yeah.
And that's where you lead into things. So going from there to a Welsh curriculum is a massive jump for people to accept. But we've proven the links, you know, and we've tried to give a summary, and it's about time now we show people how big this problem is.
Yeah.
And exactly where our drive and passion comes from, because it doesn't come from our back pocket.
Yeah.
It hasn't. You do not get this from thin air.
Yeah.
You know?
So let's talk
Kinsey then.
Let's talk a little bit about Kinsey. Now, like I said, I think the two of us still have a little bit of knowledge, but we're still not overwhelmed in knowledge with Kinsey, because there is just so much to learn about him. But he started off as a zoologist, I believe.
Yeah.
And moved into sexology. So I think first of all it was the female book he wrote or published.
No, I think it was the male book he published first, because he worked under another professor, and this guy was a professor of sexology, and that guy put him in touch with Green, Green, and who was sexually abusing everyone in sight, who had by a certain age slept with absolutely every member of his family.
So yes, well, I got his name here. We'll get to him, but as you know, Kinsey started his main what he was trying to say was, you know, he basically wanted to massively liberalize sex. Excuse my English. That this idea that there was nothing abnormal with sex, that fantasies and, you know, especially to the extreme, were all very normal. It was more about the person it was being received by, as opposed to, but you know, this was all very normal. Same with men. He overestimated how many like homosexuals there was, and again, just very, very opens up people to sex and how harmless sex was.
I think, like what I've looked into, I think it was a bit deeper than that, Adele. I think it was more of a personal thing for him.
Well, this is it. So,
because he also said as well, what he said, he
and-
asked somebody to film 2,000 orgasms for him. And I think people...
this is what, yeah, so this was it. On the surface, Kinsey was just presenting himself as somebody who was doing research, and this is what the research was telling us, that, you know, however, what we didn't know, or what most people didn't know, was where this research was coming from. And Kinsey has quoted himself as having a fascination with sex, sadomasochistic. He was homosexual, adulterous, had voyeuristic behaviors, and he wrote journals on his own sexual fetishes and habits. And as you said, he personally interviewed thousands of people on their sex life. He also had a room set up in his attic to film people having sex and then to document it. A lot of his work came from prisons. They were, as you said, they certainly weren't generalized to the population.
Well, the book led us to believe that this was a generalization of the males in general. It wasn't. That's what his research led people to believe.
Yeah.
But I want to point something out that's really important here, and I think, hiya Sandy, and I think what's really, really important that we can fetch forward to today is what he said to his filmmaker. He said to his filmmaker, be warned, the filming this stuff, nothing will turn you on. Nothing visual will ever, after a certain point, nothing's going to turn you on. It's going to desensitize you. That's what that was a quote, a direct quote from his mouth, okay? So if he's saying that back then about desensitizing, what are they bringing forward for the children?
Yeah.
That's his words.
And obviously the main thing the biggest huge thing to be discovered with Kinsey was the push towards that children were sexual beings. And again, research was showing this. Children were sexual beings. Children could enjoy sexual relationships with a caring, loving adult. And all of this started being published. And obviously with the work of Judith Reisman, which exposed a lot of Kinsey, that we discovered that all this research in children was coming from children being abused by paedophiles. Kinsey would pay people. He would interview people in prison, paedophiles that were in prisons. And as you said, what did you say his name was, Kim?
He was called Green. He given, I can't remember if Green was his code name or if it was his real name. So in the books he's documented as something, but either in real life or in the books he's Green. So Green.
I have wrote it down.
And he was a very charismatic character. He was abusing everyone's kids. He'd had sex with every member in his family. The children's mothers loved him. Everyone absolutely loved him, and he was a big supplier of this, and his crimes were so horrific. He would hide his diaries in the desert, and Kinsey would persuade him to hand them over. So
I have another one here. Rex King. It's saying Rex King raped at least 800 infants, children, kin, strangers. And Kinsey dubbed Rex his hero, and considered him to be a scientific treasure.
Yes, that's it, man. His name is Green, isn't it? His real name is something Green, yeah.
But again, as you talked, I don't know if this is the same one because I wrote it down somewhere else. As you said, Kinsey refused to release any of this information. So none of these offenders, with Green, with him, as you said, none of his offenders none of the offenders have ever been prosecuted.
In actual, well, can I just say this? This is really important. There is a documentary, a Channel 4 documentary, and you will hear Alfred Kinsey's colleagues, people that's alive to this day, telling you, you will never get that research. You will never get it.
Yeah.
Never ever get it, and they laugh about it. There was one girl, she was being abused by her father for this, and she actually read on a piece of paper. It was, so Kinsey would teach these paedophiles how to record their findings, because he would time with a stopwatch how long it took these children to orgasm.
Yeah.
And one child seen on this piece of paper that she said, "What does that say?" ORGAZM. She was American. And he said, "Orgasm." And he said, "Come on, hurry up, because we've got a deadline." Now that woman, she speaks on this documentary as well. She's very upset when she's speaking about this rape. The Kinsey Institute's response to that is, "Don't worry, nobody'll ever find out who you are." And that was his words coming out of his mouth. That's nobody's interpretation. That was what he said. She got nothing to worry about. Nobody'll ever find out who she is. Yeah. And they want to re-republish that now.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, it was that it was reprinted in 1998. And as you were saying with that was what the infamous Table 34. And it says here, sexual responses of children and infants and teens abused by adult males. Pedophiles conducted sexual experiments on hundreds of children by bringing them to what they called an orgasm. Screaming, weeping, fighting the sexual partner, and filming these responses and timing these responses as a stopwatch. And as you know, all this was taken as a sexual response. So when that child was screaming, it was being marked down as a sexual response. And one of them, I believe it was a full, on that table, it's 20, for one child, that went on for a full 24 hours.
The youngest child was 2 months old. Or was it 5 months old?
I think it was actually 4 months old, but it's irrelevant, really.
Okay, yeah, let's just make a really important point here now. That's not actually historic research, is it, Adele? That what you're talking about there. Yeah. Those findings that you're reading out there are historical findings, but this research isn't historical, is it? It's actually what we would refer to as a longitudinal study.
Yes, which we were quite shocked to realize, but then also not shocked at all. So the Kinsey Institute is still up and running, and yes, they've got an app that you can have on your phone, which asks everybody and anybody to write to them and send them their sexual experiences, their sexual desires, their sexual fantasies, their sexual acts. It will always be confidential. There's absolutely no limits to what
you can send.
That they can disclose. So
you won't get in trouble for it or nothing, your confidentiality. You can commit as many crimes as you want, as long as they get their scientific data.
Yeah, and I think here, as you were saying earlier, what's it?
Or can I just say, while you're looking there, I want to say hi to Gwyneth, Sandy, Jeffrey, Joe, and Gwyneth again. Yeah, 5 months on the table chart, Gwyneth just said. Now, I'm doing good, guys, and I got the 2 laptops tonight. I went live off 2 phones as well. I'm really upping the stakes, Al.
Well, you have here, it says, Kinsey's research methods have been widely criticised as unscientific and grossly skewed. His research has been dismissed by qualified researchers for failing to meet even minimal standards of accepted research design. Kinsey used biased, unrepresentative samples and coercive interview tactics to elicit his data, purporting to show that most people are highly promiscuous and regularly engage in unconventional sexual behavior. We know that he chose prison, prostitutes, paedophiles. Kinsey's work is based, there is nobody who you would deem as having a normal, not boring. Most, a lot of people don't have boring sex lives, but
everything's extreme, eye-watering, extreme.
Yeah.
If people really need to look at that book, Human Behavior, the Sexual Behavior of the Human Male. Chapter 5 is where the really bad stuff is, and the words in that, they are describing, so they're describing this child displaying their sexual pleasure. It's torture. It's absolute torture, and it goes into detail, but it's trying to butter it up. Now, if people that's confused about sex education documents, I think they're seeing things as all right. Go and have a look at that chapter and have a look how they describe this abuse and how they make it appear compared to how it is in reality. And then you'll have a little good idea of how what we see with these documents. You'll see the difference. You'll have a little idea of the difference, what we see between those and what you see between them,
I think there's also a documentary on YouTube which has that footage as well that you're talking about. It's all contained. I think it's nearly 2 hours long. It's called the Kinsey Reports. I've got a friend who's watched it, and she said it was absolutely stomach churning to watch. So, advise on it. But this is what we're saying. So, need to understand now is that with these reports, Kinsey started becoming known as a hero. The Sex Godfather is what he was known as. And this became then, this then brought into the start of the 60s, the swinging 60s, the start of the sexual revolution, and the start of sex education starting to filter into schools. Now, Kinsey also had 2 best friends, Wardle Pomeroy and Mary Caldone. And it's important to say now as well that Kinsey started I got to keep going, I haven't wrote my notes down in order very well yet. But Kinsey obviously started the Kinsey Institute. And they've changed the name now. It's not called the Kinsey Institute now. It's the Institute of Gender and something.
Well, it's still coming up as a Kinsey Institute unless they've got like a sister one.
I will, when I come through my notes, I'll find it now. Oh, here it is. It says, so he founded the Institute for Sex Research at Indiana University, which was known as the Kinsey, which is now known as the Kinsey Institute for Research in Sex, Gender and Reproduction. That's what the Kinsey Institute is known as now. So
CCAS was developed because the Kinsey Institute had a bit of was under the spotlight, then that's how CCAS came about, wasn't it? CCAS was like
CCAS came from Mary Caldone. Mary Caldone was Kinsey's biggest fan. She was Kinsey's right-hand woman, and she shared all the same views as Kinsey. And in 1964, then she started CCAS, the Sexuality, Information and Education Council of the United States. Now, what did she start CCAS with? Where did she get the money from to start CCAS? That would be Hugh Hefner. So CCAS was started with seed money from Hugh Hefner. Now, we already know Hugh Hefner's views on sexuality.
Yes.
So Mary believed that sex in society was puritanical and repressed. It had too many no's in sex ed and not enough yeses. She wanted a sex ed that would teach children that from the day that they were born, that they were sexual beings, and that expression of their sexuality is positive, natural, and healthy. She told parents that children are sexual, They think sexual thoughts and they do sexual things. Parents must accept and honor their child's erotic potential. She says this on the basis that professionals who study children have recently affirmed the strong sexuality of a newborn. Now, we know what this research is that she is talking about. So Seekers argued publicly for the relaxing of taboos against adult and child sexuality, even incest. So that was the birth of Seekers. But can I just say also, with the birth of Seekers, in terms of Kinsey, because I want people to understand.
Can I read out Wardell Pomeroy's quote on that note?
Please do.
So, as Adele mentioned, Wardell Pomeroy was another associate of Alfred Kinsey. Now, he co-authored many papers. He's actually co-author of the sexual behavior in the human male as well. Okay, so he's a very prominent figure. He actually became president of Seekers at one point. He was a big supporter of incest, and this is a quote of his now. And if you want to find this quote, it's in another fabulous woman, and this is Dr. Miriam Grossman. We'll discuss her later on. This is a quote from her book, and this is what he says: "In father-daughter incest, the daughter's age makes all the difference in the world. The older she is, the likelier she is that the experience will be a positive one. The best sort of incest of all, surprisingly enough, is that between a son and a mother who is really educating him sexually and who then encourages him to go out with girls." So this is the thinking behind everything.
Mm. Yeah. And we got here, so this, exactly. So we got here, so the Kinsey Reports, so that was the sex of the human female and the human male, has led to the repeal of numerous laws in America. It's been credited with convincing state legislators to reduce penalties for things like abortion, rape, statutory rape, wife and child battery, sodomy, bestiality. So in 1964, this was one of the this is one of Kinsey's statements that was kind of the deal breaker for reducing a lot of these penalties, which are still reduced today because of it. He said that 95% of the 9,000 males in our history, so in our history as in being prominent males of history, so figures of authority, were sexual offenders and considered sexually deviant under the law. Therefore, sex laws needed to be liberalized or repealed, or practically all men would be in prison. So his thesis was all men are like this. So he said, again, then extensive data and research in children or on children has proved that they are unharmed by sex. Again, we didn't know this data that he's talking about was the abuse of children.
And then we can even go back to again that quote of desensitization.
Yeah.
Because children that live in an environment of incest, and it's hereditary, you know, it runs through the thing. They do become desensitized to it.
Yeah.
You know, they do become desensitized to it. So already we can see a pattern there.
Yeah. We're saying here you had a subcommittee in California had originally been organized to strengthen sex crime penalties. And after a hearing from Kinsey, they recommended a widespread of paroles and leniency. Wardell Pomeroy admitted himself that Kinsey personally worked on the revision of sex laws in 6 states in America. In 2004, you had a group of nearly 3,000 US lawmakers warn of the influence Kinsey Institute has been able to have in launching the sexual revolution, reducing sex crimes, and sabotaging American laws. Again, just saying, his research, which we know has largely been dismissed because he intentionally selected non-representative sexual deviant research, sex offenders, again, criminals, prostitutes, and paedophiles. So how this research is, I think the legal database shows that Kinsey's been cited over 650 times in criminal cases in sex laws, and he's reduced the penalties of 52 sex crimes, all on data which has come from sexual deviance. So this is why this is relevant to what we're saying, because it might be history, but it's not history. And that takes us back to with Mary Caldone.
And this is why it's important, right? When you're actually conducting a piece of research, you don't just wake up one day and just create something and that is your research. You have to show research off someone's research. You have to reference someone's work. I remember when I first ever went to college and we discussed ADHD and I said something and they said, how do you know? I said, well, I know. But that wasn't good enough. And I had to find somebody that actually said it and documented it before me. So you cannot just all of a sudden cook up these sex education documents. They have to come from research. So this research has come from that research, which comes from that research, which comes from that research. It is unethical. It is wholly unethical, and it needs to be stopped.
And if Kinsey's research is all research should be, I'm not very good at speaking tonight, replicable? You should be able to replicate research. Kinsey's research can't ever be ethically replicated.
No, I can't. Not unless it's in secrecy.
Which then it would be unethical.
Man, it can never be generalized.
And you absolutely cannot get consent from a child in that to have an experiment conducted on them of that nature. You can't experiment on them full stop anyway.
For a start, what that child is experiencing is a biological reaction.
Yeah.
Sex is an emotive issue. We release something called oxytocin, I think. Is that what it's called? And it becomes attachment, especially for girls. Girls release it and it becomes attachment. So it doesn't matter which way you look at sex and how you try to desensitize yourself and how much it's all trying to be freedom, there is always going to be emotional issues there.
We've talked about this before, Kim. I've said this at our rallies on stage, saying, a boy's desire for sex at 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 is driven by their hormones and a need to want to just release this energy. A girl is having a completely different experience to that boy. So you cannot teach them sex of the same way. None of this sex education at all, at once, talks about the emotional side of having sex. It only talks about their child's sexual health. It only talks about their physical health, STIs, and not getting pregnant.
Yeah, but the thing is that even that is a bit squiffed as well, Adele. How do they measure their data? Are they taking into account the amount of morning after pills? Are they taking into account the amount of do you know what I mean? How would they collect
all the emotional they don't talk about the emotional effects.
No, and another thing that is risk of infection. So we've got females and their immune systems are really low, at least once a month. That's 12 times a year, which they are prone to infection. Then that is not discussed. We look at when they talk about anal sex and using objects. Now, the anal canal is a very thin piece of skin. I'm not a doctor, but I just know from here, I'm trying to explain in layman's terms. It's very thin piece of skin in there. It's a membrane, I think it's called. And that could be torn easy, which leads to infection, which leads to sepsis. You can also have something which is called it's called FBI, so foreign body insertion. So if sometimes the anal canal has collapsed, in people, especially children, and they have to have something called a 3D repair. None of this is discussed, and no matter how rare or how what's what I'm looking for, rare and common something is, neither of them are discussed.
Yeah.
Well, but these children are told,
there's a lot of stuff missing from this post-sex education.
You are sorry?
I said there's a lot missing out from this sex education.
Well, I've done a little thing on I've done a video before on our RSE draft, and I've just done a little bit now on the Cardiff document. And so I've looked into it, and I've tried to explain to people that when you look at these documents, okay, they might read great. When you look in the back and you realise, now what we are looking for, we are looking for safeguarding, empowerment, meaningful relationships, biology. We're looking for all these things now. And for us, safeguarding is a whole other level, Adele. You know what I mean? For us, safeguarding should have a report of its own, but that's it's a different story.
Yeah.
When I'm looking in this document now, I'm expecting from the references in the back, I'm expecting to see some balance. So I'd expect to see some health. I'd expect to see some sexuality. I'd expect to see some safeguarding. I'd expect to see all these things about relationships, about families. I'd expect to see it all. And all I'm seeing is sexuality.
Yeah.
It's very overpowering with sexuality. All right, it's a good report, but isn't this just a fifth of the report?
Yeah.
Don't tell me this is the full package. So you look into it. And when you look into it, it's got a little bit on safeguarding. It'll tell you a little bit about the law. It'll tell you the most common statistic, and we all know 1 in 5, according to NSPCC, 1 in 5 adults report being abused. We don't know anyone to crack in a survey though. So it doesn't actually talk about prevention. Doesn't talk about perpetrators of abuse. Doesn't talk about how to stop.
So let's look at that a little bit. Let's look at that a little bit more. As you're saying, we're seeing certain things. We're seeing influences of the Kinsey sex education, which takes us back to SECAS.
Yes.
And SECAS, as we said, was started by Mary Caldone, who was very much an advocate of children got to have sexual rights from birth. Children were sexual from birth, so long as it's all done loving. That, a big promoter of changing incest laws, as was Wardell Pomeroy, massive, supporter of changing incest laws. You had somebody called James Ramey. Now, he wrote a SECAS report. I was telling you a little bit about this earlier. It's called, if you Google him, James Ramey and the Last Taboo. This was a report that SECAS wrote in 1979. I know it sounds a long time ago. That's only 3 years before I was born. It's not that long ago. So to me, to think that this paper was published essentially in my time is really quite scary. And this paper is saying how he has met with Mary Caldone back a few years ago, with Wardell, with Kinsey at this big do that they all go and meet things. And very much the subject is about incest and cultures, and how different cultures have one thing was sure: throughout every culture, incest had a taboo. It just depended on who the taboo was with. Some cultures, cousins is okay, uncle and niece is okay, brother and sister is okay, but in others it's not. But in every culture there would be one incest taboo. And this SECAS then report, this whole article then now in 1979 is saying, again, we need to talk about this. We need to get rid of these incest laws. That a relationship between a father and a daughter, a son and a mother, brother, should be celebrated. It's actually really healthy.
So they want to get rid of the last taboo.
So this saying the last taboo in our society.
But we're not talking about the first taboo yet. we're not addressing the first taboo to be addressing the last taboo.
So, well, but to them, they've already decided that paedophilia and stuff like that's not a problem.
The thing is, right, a lot of them as well, right, paedophile is not a dirty word to them. It means child love.
Yeah.
Paedophile is not a dirty word.
Yeah, a paedophile is somebody who is attracted to a pubescent child, and that is what they see themselves as. I don't want to use the word true paedophile, right? Because because they are genuinely warped. They don't see wrong in what they're doing. And this is why we say, Kim, it's important to talk about how not all child abusers are these violent, dishonest. If you have a paedophile who believes in his love for his child, that he believes what he's doing is right, it should be allowed. And to him, he's not harming it. And to that child, she is not being harmed, or he is not being harmed physically. They're not, to them, they don't even know they're being harmed emotionally. They think they are engaged in a loving, normal relationship with their parent.
And sometimes they see it as a step further than love.
Yeah. Oh, it's an ultimate connection. What they have is more
different.
Yeah.
You know, it's like I'm the special one. And it's not until a lot of them they start school, they get a bit older, they start to come, you know, puberty and things like that. And a lot of these things come out in the school changing rooms, or, you know, as kids discuss things amongst themselves, and they realize that this other stuff isn't happening amongst other families.
So this is something I've not looked into this myself. I've never looked into it, but I knew somebody who had given her son up for adoption, and he had found her. I think he was now maybe early 20s, and her partner over time started saying how he believed his partner and her son were actually possibly in a sexual relationship. And he was saying to me that when they first, or it all came about and the son were interact, apparently like the social worker or whomever was the intermediate for them spoke how sometimes when a parent child have been reunited after a separation like that, that their love for each other is so overwhelming that they confuse the like this overwhelming amount of love and enter into, but I've never looked into it, but apparently that's something that can happen between a parent and a child who's been separated for a long period of time, that they can sometimes, obviously I'm not saying it's a rare thing, but sometimes they can end up in a same with siblings.
I think a lot of that would go back to trauma as well, wouldn't it?
Okay. It's I'm not understanding, but I thought that was very, you know, interesting how that those who don't think they're doing anything wrong are feeling about, and that's why. But then somebody like Kinsey was not a paedophile. He was a sex predator. He was a violent,
anything goes,
psychopathic sex predator.
And that's another thing we always pick up on as well. There's a difference between a paedophile and a sex offender. You know, sex offenders, anyone is vulnerable. It's as simple as that. Anyone is vulnerable. And
I've got. So you have John Money. He's another CICUS board member. He's quoted as saying that childhood sexual experience, such as being the partner of a relative or of an older person, need not necessarily affect the child's adversely. Again, just so that Wardle, he wrote a book called Boys and Sex, which was actually recommended from age 10 upwards. where in the book he says that incest between adults and younger children can be a satisfying and enriching experience, and sometimes be beneficial. He's been quoted in Time magazine. So this is not, we haven't had to look far for this information. This is public. They publicly advocated all of this. And he was quoted in Time magazine as saying, "It's time to admit incest need not be a perversion or a symptom of mental illness." And like I said, but this obviously this affects this then affects the whole ideology and how it filters down. So can I just say, like, sexologists are still obviously very much a thing, and something new I learned. So have you heard of sexual attitude reconstructing seminars, also known as SARS-2, funnily enough? And it's for modern day sexologists. Again, this was all set up, decided by, influenced by Kinsey, where they're required to partake. What they have to go through is largely mirrors a lot of Kinsey's methods. And to become a certified sexologist today, students are required to partake in these SARS events, which include watching hours of pornography to help readjust their sexual attitudes.
Shall I read this quote from Mary what's her name?
Calderon.
So this is from Talking with Your Child About Sex. Questions and answers for children from birth to puberty by sex ed matriarch and Seekers founder Mary Calderon. This is what she says to parents, okay? Children are sexual and think sexual thoughts and do sexual things. Mom and dad must accept and honor their child's erotic potential.
I've got that written down here somewhere as well, and it's just like, again, this is all coming from Seekers, and again we'll explain in a moment as to how then Seekers is then connected to what we're talking about now. Just in line with Kinsey's influence, April 23rd, 2014, the Kinsey Institutes became what? Members of the United Nations. So Kinsey was granted special consultative status with ECOSOC, the Economic and Social Council of the United Nations. Now, I watched their 3-minute quote on that. And I don't know, not quite sure what it is now. But basically, Seeker said that they are absolutely not an advocacy institution. They just offer training. They just offer training, and they've got no influence. Now, there was so much in terms of the Kinsey and the influence that they have. They do plenty of advocacy. They've co-sponsored and organized events to help to fund sexual rights advocacy groups. They do a lot of work for like Pride Foundation, the sex positive culture, research activism. When I went into the list, it actually went on and on and on. And I just went, that has to be another day at looking at all the stuff that Kinsey Institute is actually involved with. So obviously Kinsey's involved with the UN, which is 2014, because at first it's important to know that the UN didn't want anything to do with this sex education. It was only then when UNESCO got on board as well that the UN bought into it. So you've now got the Kinsey Institute in the UN.
Yeah, but UNESCO is UN anyway.
Yes, but I mean, it was when that sub part of UNESCO when that area got involved. So, and then where does SECUS fit into all of this? Well, Nanette Ecker for one.
Yeah, she writes the documents.
Now, I'm just going to read out, if that's okay, some of the stuff that Nanette Ecker, some of the questions that, or some of the aims which Nanette Ecker has wrote herself. So this is the 2009 UNESCO document. This was the original, this was the first printed document. And all of this now is just in pages 43 to 49 on that 2009 document. So this is aims and objectives for 5 to 8, age 5 to 8. This is just a few. So girls and boys have private body parts that can feel pleasurable when touched by oneself. Bodies can feel good when touched. Touching and rubbing one's genitals is called masturbation. Children should know that they have a right to decide who touches their body and where. Then age 9 to 12, it kind of steps up a little gear. First thought, some of the objectives is to know how to deal with the pressure in having to have sex, to be able to define sexual harassment and coercive sex, including rape. To know that both men and women can give and receive sexual pleasure. How masturbation is often a person's first sexual experience. To know that many boys and girls masturbate during puberty. Know the differences between sex, sexuality, gender, gender role, gender identity, and sexual orientation. To know about excitement, vaginal lubrication, penile erection, and ejaculation. There's just some of the objectives and aims for children from 5 to 12. Now, I do not want, even at 12, a child doesn't need to know this. Now, of course, this level of detail is no longer
Where's the biology
in the document that we are seeing. It's not put out in black and white like that anymore. Over the years, they're revising it a little bit more and a little bit, making it sound tamer and more. And just to put it to people here in Wales, with so many people, our government's done a wonderful thing by putting the population index in the title. But what we are receiving is CSE, Comprehensive Sexuality Education. That is what it's called. That is what it has always been called. That is what Kinsey called it, and that is what it is still called. The reason we don't have CSE is because that stands for child sexual exploitation here. Those letters are already being used.
We've only just adopted the term child sex exploitation, and that covers like the grooming aspect of things and children aged between 16 and 18. So that is a newly recognised term here, but they don't want to confuse that now. You know, we're only just picking up on it. So it's totally understandable why then there's SRE in England. What's bordering England, Scotland? What are they going to be? RSE. Look next door, what's the SRE? Can't be the same. We got England, they look next door, what's the RSE? They look next door, what's the SRE? Can't be the same. And we know 100% they are. Because even our Cardiff document, the report put in 2017 by Cardiff Uni Professor Emma, I don't know her name. She, even that, it says the future of sexuality and relationships education.
Well, we know from the letters some of the parents were receiving in my own Torfaen, but well, in my town in Cwmbran. They were receiving letters. I was receiving those letters then from them. And the first half of the letter, it's being referred to as RSE. And then there'd be a paragraph at the bottom, which is calling it SRE, where you know that letter's been edited with a link saying this is a Welsh sex education. And then you click on the link and it takes you to the English SRE sex education.
Is there anything but? And this is why we will not accept, we're not going to accept a policy change. We're not going to accept an RSE board. We're not going to accept nothing like that. What happens when we're not around anymore? What happens when we're not around to keep an eye on us? No. The thing is, like you said, right, this sex education and this sex research has changed laws. It's not doing that in this country. That law is not coming in this country. They want sex education, all well and good. We want sex education. We want far more educated adults.
I'm actually very curious now. My little mind goes wandering, as you know, and I want to look into finding out if Kinsey has been, and if so, how much has actually been used in any UK court cases. Has he been cited in any of ours? So that's a little interesting. I'll be looking at. I'm already looking at it in my head, but that would be interesting to know. And this is absolutely it. CICAS are involved with UNESCO. UNESCO is the documents that we got. Now, where is it that we can see Kinsey in our document? One statement: good and bad secrets.
Yeah.
This is where we see these things that don't, when we talk about all these different types of abusers, and when we talk about normalizing.
Can I pick up on that point when we talk about different types of abusers? Because we know different types of abusers. That's what makes us different to other people. They know of one kind, they know of, do you know what I mean, one pattern or one thing, or somebody's told them something. We know in great detail of all different types of abusers.
And this is it. And this sex education, although it proclaims to safeguard against sexual abuse, it's also stereotyping and boxing into one category that these children are being abused. I am all up for our children are in so much danger of abuse all around them, especially now with these times of technology. That the risk has been amplified hugely. There's so many more areas they can be abused now, and we absolutely 100% need to tackle child sex abuse in our country, on our planet. And it needs something. And we are not going to save our children and protect them by telling them that they need to learn the difference between a good secret and a bad secret, and to know when it is that when a touch feels good and a touch feels bad. Because for many children, their abuse does not feel bad.
Yeah.
We are not protecting those children. You're lumping these abuse victims into a box.
They're like
so much more than that.
Are injured by their abuse, okay, and they are left very sore, and there are visual. You can pick up on visual cues or things they do, but abuse survives in secrecy. So especially if it's a lone perpetrator, right? You're not going to see these signs because everything is so secret. So it needs to be soft and gentle, and it needs to be not leave any injuries behind or any soreness behind or any sign, you know. And that is a massive point here, is the secrecy. So you're not meant to see it. And then when you get the more violent offenders, then you find with the violent offenders, they're being protected by other people. It's pretty difficult to hide that level of violence. And you know, it's from my experience and what I've learned, you'll find the more violent offenders are usually in the groups, are usually the rings or the gangs. That's what I find. Or if there's a violent, volatile household anyway. But apart from that, especially interfamilial abuse, if it's a member of the family or a close family friend, very rare is violent. You know, a friend of mine, she's waived her right to anonymity, and I'll never forget. It's rang so true to me. She was being abused by her uncle, and she said, "I thought I was going to marry him."
Yeah. Well, that absolutely brings me on to you posted a half an hour. That doesn't sound like it's short, but in the amount that there is to discuss when it comes to all this, half an hour is short. So you've managed to kind of capture it well. But in it, there is a video of, is his name Tom O'Carroll?
Yeah.
So yeah, the former pie. However, he touches on saying how it's society, and you're saying you know that your friend believed she was going to marry her uncle. And again, this is one of Kinsey's ethoses, and he is quoted to say that it's difficult to understand why a child, unless conditioned, should be disturbed by having its genitals touched. So he claims that it's only when you tell a child that what is happening to them is wrong, do you then, and for some children, doesn't make it okay, but that is the case until it's spelt out in front of them that what's happened to them was wrong. But that's not society now putting the guilt on the child, and that's wrong as society. It's because what happened was wrong, and we can never allow it just because a child is being fooled and tricked and manipulated into thinking.
Like you've said before, a child usually loves their abuser more than they love their teacher, or, you know?
Yeah.
A child needs to be told about the trouble it can cause for the adults because what they're doing is wrong.
Yeah.
Not you choose if it's right or wrong. No, it's all wrong. It's as simple as that. You don't pick and choose when it's wrong. And going back to when my friend said about she thought she was going to marry her uncle. Do you know, my heart sunk because I'll never forget it, Caleb, and he was only about 4, and he used to say to me, "I love you so much. I'm going to marry you." And I have to explain, you can't marry your mommy.
Yeah.
But I love you so much. I know, but you can't marry your mommy because it's different loves. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So when she told me that, and I got my own son telling me how much he loves me so much he wants to marry me, that's so innocent. That is so goddamn innocent. And do you know when you can kind of visualize, you know, that child was in such a horrid place, but her mind was thinking innocence. You know, there was no difference in her thinking to what my son's thinking was. The only difference was the adults and the acts that were going on around them. They can't differentiate between the difference of affection. They can't differentiate between the difference of love. They can't tell the difference between unconditional love and the love of their friend. And the friend they got today.
And can I just say, I'm experiencing this myself at the moment. I know I've talked to you a little bit personally about it, but to be honest, it's coming up so regularly at the moment. It's a bit of an ongoing thing. And my daughter, she's 8, and she's just talking to me so much about sexuality all of a sudden. And her friendship with her friend. She's asked me, is she bisexual? I said, you're 8 years old, love, you're not anything. And she was like, but Mum, I can't tell you how much I love my friend. And now this is her best friend suffers with anxiety, and my daughter is very much her crutch in school. They're glued together. My daughter helps her with everything. Now, my daughter's seen some of her friends during lockdown, but this friend she doesn't see. They speak on the phone, but she doesn't see. So my daughter's desperate to get back to school. So I tried to have a conversation with her last night, but not just that, my daughter has also got precocious puberty. So she started puberty very early. So I'm also trying to be aware that she's experiencing hormones that most 8-year-olds are not experiencing at her age. But I was trying to explain to her that she's missing her best friend an incredible amount. You know, her hormones are all a bit weird, making her emotional, and she's up and she's down. And I explained to her that it is okay to have a really strong feeling of love for a friend, that's okay. You can feel like you love, and that love you are going to feel for your friend is going to feel different to the love that you are used to feeling with one of your family members. But just because it's different doesn't mean it's... My daughter does it when I try and explain to her then what a girlfriend is, and you know that a girlfriend might kiss. She's like, well, hang on, which is then why I'm trying to explain to her that what she's feeling and talking to her about right now isn't sexuality.
Yeah.
She's too young to she doesn't understand.
Yeah, but she's trying to put it into the thing context, like.
Yeah, and again, I do feel that
she's got around her.
This is massively influenced by... I thought she must be hearing sexuality coming from YouTube or something, but it's her friend talking to her about it. So I'm guessing she's maybe seen something on YouTube. It's incredibly difficult to monitor what your child is watching. You cannot, any parent who says that they are able to monitor every single thing their child is watching when they're on YouTube, unless you put YouTube onto your main telly, and you're in the room while it is on. You know, my daughter knows what I like, you know, what my preferred things for her I accept. She doesn't watch telly. YouTube is telly.
Yeah.
It is up to me to filter out the channels and have the restrictions on the best I can, but I cannot stop the things that has filled. She talks to me about gay. She's always talking to me about transgender. She's always talking to me about free love, and you know, and it's already understanding. I put on a music video. She had a friend was here the other day, and I went to put the music channel on. It was actually quite a song I liked that's on the radio, and it was on. Not an overly sexual song, but then the video, I was like, we're going to have to have the radio on. I cannot have the music channels on because it is just sex. Nothing but... I know they always have been, but now it is so like graphic and raunchy, and yeah, like they do this.
No, I think that
learning this at this young age, we are just normalizing it even more.
It's not just that, right? It's not just sexualizing of it, right? These teenagers and these boys and girls are under pressure to look like this.
Yeah.
They're under pressure to look like this. Now, so like we've got all these mental health problems already, right? So we got a 2-year waiting list in CAMHS. Do they even realize that when a child posts a picture on Facebook and they don't get likes, do they realize the impact on our child? How that feels? Because they haven't had likes on Facebook.
The psychological impact that each like and each comment is having with each and every one, and what that's doing and how it's changing, and again the addictiveness of it. But
our children will use their internet to defend. Oh yeah, that's
exactly. Exactly it. Any parent who is able to say that they are monitoring what their child is watching 24/7, well, they can please come and teach me how they've got the time to do that. And not just that, I'm a mother who's going to admit I am not perfect, and especially when I'm doing uni work also. I'm trying to do research and do things for this, trying to promote, you know, going onto social media, as well as homeschool. So unless I'm going to then be sat there engaging in an activity, I could set an activity up. Even with setting up an activity to do with painting, my daughter wants to go on the phone to look for ideas of what she's going to paint, of what she's going to draw. she watches all these TikTok. She doesn't go on TikTok. I don't have TikTok, but they're TikTok videos on YouTube of artists, and so she goes on there for a lot for her art. But there is times where she goes into her bedroom. I am busy, and I am grateful for the hours or 2 hours peace and quiet so I can get on with a few things that I need to do, whether that be housework or uni or work. And she's in there, and I am not knowing. I do check, and if I can hear, I'm always got that. You do always have that one ear out, and sometimes I'll hear a word and I'll go, "What are you watching?" But we just can't.
Kids don't know a life outside of digital now, do they? They don't know a life outside of it.
Yeah, and what better way to remove that memory even more than lock them down for the next 2 years? You know, let's have them forget what it ever even felt like to play outside.
Let's disconnect them completely.
Yeah, you know, it's troubling. You know, it really is troubling. And you know, our views is that all this sex education, especially when it gets too comprehensive, once it gets to secondary school, you know, it is just kind of do what you want to do. In fact, let's give you a list of things you can do. Just do it safely and do it with consent.
Yeah, we just read, you know, message about children will use the internet at their friends' houses. We cannot control what the friends' parents allow. That can be tough. I'm not a fan of my daughter going to sleepovers with her friends. You know what? That's a pattern that's occurring, and that's come up in the sex.
Oh, most definitely.
Funny enough.
My daughter talks about 5 nights at Freddy's. Now I know that's come from the kids on my street who are older boys, you know, back over it. No, that's something that's not allowed. My nephew is far more allowed to watch far more stuff than.
I never forget it. My son is very clever, and when he used to have detention in school, he can hack the internet, so you can get on anything. And he had in school suspension once, and the next minute an email off him. He's like, "Hey, I'm in school, best day ever. I'm watching Family Guy." I don't like Family Guy.
Yeah.
I don't approve of Family Guy.
Yeah.
So even on the school grounds.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, even down to Horrid Henry. I can't stand Horrid Henry. And when Ayla was younger, if we were at someone's house and Horrid Henry, I'd be like, turn that off. I do not want my child watching Horrid Henry.
Oh, Horrid Henry was on in my house because Logan, Horrid Henry wasn't a patron, Logan.
But I hated Horrid. But yeah, it is difficult. It's difficult when you said when your child goes over. I like to think, I try to be aware of, I think I know the things that, you know, my daughter should or shouldn't be watching. And if I think she's watching something, and that's because I think it's not about age appropriate, it's mature appropriate.
Yeah.
Right? Age appropriate is a pish saying, I hate it. It's no such thing as age appropriate. You know, it's maturity appropriate.
Father God, be little brat. Tracy Beaker.
I'd skip Tracy Beaker.
Yeah, my friend's daughter was into Tracy Beaker, and but see, we didn't realise what the program was even about. Because you put them on, the kids are in front of you, you don't even realise the story. Now, I didn't even realise that she was a kid in care 3 years after I'd been watching it. But I hadn't been watching it, do you know what I mean? We were in the same room as her. We weren't paying no attention. I remember one woman did a post on Facebook. She had longer twins. And she said she'd laid her twins down and she'd realised that when she on her phone, when she looked over, they were looking at her. So she practiced it one day. She done a little experiment. And what she realised was, in the time that she was on her phone, browsing or something on Facebook, and she said how long she was on there, her twins had glanced over at her a total of 28 times. She'd missed that all 28 times, you know? It's a massive distraction to everyone as well, isn't it?
Oh, yes. Like, I think it's a whole subject on its own, isn't it? Technology. And actually, I think if I wasn't weeks behind in my uni work, I would have. I know one of my next chapters coming up in should have already done it, but I've got a lot of catching up to do, is actually all kids in the digital era. So be interesting.
Oh, fantastic. That is an area of my dissertation, so I'll be after you for that.
So yeah, it's yeah. But yeah, I think that's a whole area again in itself. I'm not sure if it was you or was it somebody who shared a photo there the other day of, obviously you've got these apps which turn you old, turn you young, and you've got men who are using these apps. So it is their photo, not even stealing photos off anybody, it's their own photos. But yeah, technology and safeguarding, I think, is a whole different area. But again, this is all relevant with the sex education in place. And you can warn people about the risks of sending nude photos. But as you are reducing their sensitivity towards sex, and as you are making them more liberal in their thoughts of sex, over time we'll develop that notion of we don't even care if your nude text was shared anyway, so what? Do you know what I mean? You already have a high, now it's difficult because I want to say each to their, it is each to their own, but you have, I don't know if you've heard of, oh, what's it called? Oh, frig, the name's gone out of my head. It's a page where you post nude photos and nude videos of yourself and stuff like that, and people then pay to see all this. I can't.
Yeah, but Adele, isn't that just expressive art these days? I mean, that's what people.
Yes, it's classed as expressive art.
Many people will claim nudity and claim it an art form. You know?
Well, this I can't think of the name. It's flying. It's so popular at the moment. I just watched a documentary on it. But I know now that also, I know that apparently there's quite a lot of girls in my town on it. That again, we're becoming so numb and sexualized in that way that I think it's going to become more, especially with this education, more and more and more, where sex is just something that's given, received, and sold, you know, with no, they're removing the emotional elements of it in these.
Well, they try into, aren't they? They try into, well, like they try to desensitize it. That's true. That's the word. Desensitization. It's simple as that. And that's a quote.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what it boils down to. It's just desensitization, and as well the change in the laws.
Yeah.
The change in the laws is a massive part of this. For years and years and years, they've campaigned to lower the age of consent. They say kids get pleasure from sex. These documents are pretty much telling us that as well. And there's no getting away from it.
Yeah.
There's no getting away from it, you know. This is what we're going down now. This will change laws if we allow it. There'll be no sex abuse.
Ladies, you're saying about nudity, but I mean, an example of that is the naked bike rides that go on. Okay. Now,
and they have naked.
They claim that's a liberating thing and it's artistic or it's an expression, but they don't take into account that when they're riding through the height. I mean, in my town, quite a little coastal town, every year you get a naked bike ride and they ride right through the town centre. 50, 60 people, completely naked, riding their bikes.
I'd probably laugh at that with my daughter, if I'm totally honest.
Oh my God.
I would probably make some
don't look. Don't look.
Over his shoulder.
One thing I don't
and watch their willy don't blow off.
Yeah. Are those naked swims, those family naked swims. Now they've
yes. Now that
there's another example.
Have an issue with.
Yeah,
definitely. But Kim, I just want to, because we are pushing on now with time, so I just want to go back to something in terms of early influences and an effect, because we haven't touched on this at all in this program yet. So again, when we've gone back to Kinsey, Mary Calzone, and the sexual being from birth, children having a right to choose, which we haven't talked about this, children and their sexual rights.
Yes.
It is a thing. And it's very much a thing, which is what is influencing all of this going on right now, that children have sexual rights from birth. And this covers a whole range of things, from reproduction, which then falls into things like hormone therapy for those with gender dissociative disorder. And we've talked a little then how this is a slippery slope for anybody who wants to go down. So we're talking about sexual rights, you know, and that sexual right is as strong as a child, you know, a child's right. And how long with this, with you've got voting now down to age 16. We know the influence behind these documents. They're now giving our children sexual rights. And if you explain what these sexual rights are, Kim, and then I want to ask you, I tell you what I hear when you tell me this stuff. What was the first thing that kind of came into my mind with it all?
Well, sexual rights are, the children have got same sexual rights as our adults. Simple as that. They've got same human rights, same sexual rights as our adults. Part of their, just give you some examples. So part of the sexual rights mean the state can administer medication to your child without your consent. So whatever you want to take that.
Can I just say, people think that's not true, but that happens now, as we've said before, the morning after pill.
So this is happening now, and there is serious consequences from this. So this is something that our Cardiff and documents don't take into consideration of the serious case reviews. So the sex education we've got in place now with the confidentiality away from parents, that is causing serious problems. So a hormone is the morning after pill.
Yeah.
We're already going down that road. And there's a lot of cases going on in England to do with hormone blockers and things like that. And we haven't looked into stuff like that. We're just looking at the immediate safeguarding changes that we are aware of. But so in Wales, more specifically, this is the most worrying thing for me. Children's rights are law, and it's the same in Scotland as well. Scotland, you were going a step further. I
think we're one of the few countries in the world where the children's rights are written into law. Yeah.
So what that means is, so in this country now and Scotland, they call it the hierarchy of rights. So children's rights come over parents' rights, because apparently parents' rights ain't even a thing anyway in their eyes. So children's rights will come over parents' rights, and with children's rights come sexual rights. Now, by removing our children from these lessons, we're in breach of their sexual rights. And when you're in breach of your child's sexual rights, you get reported to local authority. This is how serious this is, and people don't seem, and nothing I want to pick up as well. Every time I mention the sexual rights in documents or petitions or things like that, it keeps disappearing.
Yeah.
So it's disappeared off our website as well. I'm amazed at that.
And just in terms of some of those sexual rights, it's just worth pointing out as well that the school will actively be on your child's side of protecting their sexual rights as well, especially when it comes around like that gender dysphoria or sexuality. And in fact, again, I can't speak too clearly on it because some of this stuff I was only reading within recent days, and it hasn't quite stuck in my head properly yet. Which is about how much the state, you said, can intervene, and the school can intervene with your child, especially if they feel that the parents are not supporting and not allowing their child to be whom they want to be, down to having a child removed from a parent if they are not helping their child in terms of things like gender dysphoria.
They're expecting a child to take the lead, basically. And a really good example of that is a lady. You'll find her on YouTube. She did an interview with Piers Morgan. I'm not his fan, but she's a trans female, and she's very, very open, and she come across so great. And she said, look, you know, I've been like this for so long. If I said now I'm a trans female, my friends will kill me, she said. But she was joking with it, and she said, but I thought I was a squirrel until I was 9. You know, so she doesn't agree with that either, you know, and it's
He's
like...
also a famous, actually, again, I must look into this to see, because it was months ago that I last looked at this to see the progress in it. There's a boy called James in, I think it's Texas. So mother is claiming that James wants to be a female, wants to be a girl, has transitioned her son to a female, calls him by a female name. In school, he is female, and she is now going through the process of trying to get hormone blockers for her son. However, the problem is when her son is with his father, he says he doesn't want to be a girl. And when he's with the father, he is known as James. He only wants to be a boy. So the father is fighting a huge court battle now. The boy has stood in court and has told the court that he does not want to be a girl. They are arguing that the mother has some sort of like Munchausen by proxy, but just not in the form of physical harm to although it is physical harm if he gets hormone blockers. And it's a massive court. And so these hormone blockers right now were only suspended so it was waiting on a decision to which way the court was going to rule, in favor of the father or in favor for the mother. And if it does rule in favor of the father, even though the boy has said in court that he doesn't want to be female, the mother will now be able to get hormone blockers. So
that defeats the object then, because I just want to say this education is very strong in Texas to the point where I'm positive. Should I say this? No, I won't say it just in case it's not true. I think it is true though. What they've done to the curriculum there.
I'm not sure. California, it is mandatory. We know that there. That was one of the...
I'm sure they've enhanced the curriculum and added a certain sexual orientation. But I'm not going to say that out loud, just in case. I don't like to, we like to stick to facts. So because I'm really like 80% sure now, I won't say that on this show. But this education is really, do you know what I mean? It's rampant there. This is pretty much where it started. It's horrific. And, so if we were looking, and if this was a child rights-based approach, right? A children's rights-based approach, which we told, why have we got that Save James campaign then? Because James already said he wants to be James.
Yeah. And another aspect of this child's rights, sexual rights, and my concern in reading these documents, and again, this is like one of the many things that was giving me red flags, was I was thinking, okay, so let's consider now we've gone into the secondary education. So already, you know, you're learning a little bit by the time you get in 2 years, 3, 4, 5 and 6 in primary. And then obviously it's ramped up a bit when it comes to secondary, especially around consent being, you know, more of a manner of not nobody gets to touch you, but you know, if you want a sexual relationship, how to protect themselves, etc. And then you have a girl who has been groomed, has been manipulated by 26-year-old, 28-year-old man, and he's met a 12, 13, 14-year-old girl. And then throughout school, she's been educated now. She's gone through all of private, being educated on her sexual rights, and it's her sexual, and she's been told to go against her parents if they don't have the same wishes, if it's not what their religion says. They're actively told to question and to challenge anybody who doesn't have the same view on their sexuality as they do. And we know that their view on sexuality is what the state's view. That's what they're being taught. And anybody who's got a different view to challenge it. So they've been brainwashed that all the way through school. So what happens then when you've got parents have took this to courts now? It's out of the girl's hands because he's a 28-year-old, even though the girl is saying, I've consented, I've consented, I've consented. And lo and behold, we've got the landmark court case where the defense has used a child's sexual rights as the defense. The girl says that she wants to be in a relationship with this man. She is consenting. She is saying it is her sexual right to be with him. And bam, we suddenly have got a court case being won where somebody, a grown adult, is not being prosecuted for being engaged with because this child's now not she's not prepubescent, so she's not counted. I think, actually, if I'm correct, I think the age is 13. So under 13 is still in the paedophilia group, and 13 and above goes into hebephilia, which is teenage children as opposed to teenage developing children as opposed to prepubescent children. So what happens then when we've got young people? You're on mute, Kim.
Yeah, but this is actually happening, right? So we haven't had the landmark case yet because the sexual rights haven't come into it, but this is actually happening. There's a woman on our group and she's going through this right now. Her daughter was sleeping with her ex, who was her stepfather at the age of 14. And this is the battle she's got.
Yeah.
You know, that kid thinks she's in a relationship with her stepfather.
Yeah.
You know, and so what you were saying isn't an if.
Yeah.
It's a when.
Yeah. Oh, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And this is why when we're on social media and people come back with a prove it or with a Google search or a little document, and we're trying to tell people that this is so much bigger. This is so much deeper.
Yeah.
And we know that you don't want it to be. Nobody wants to think there's conspiracy in anything. And I don't have a problem with this sex education being called a conspiracy, because it is.
It is a conspiracy.
It's not a theory. We're providing the evidence. This comes from a movement that started in the 50s.
But to me, this is a conspiracy.
It is that's what I said. It is a conspiracy.
I'm a criminologist. You know what I mean? You work with conspiracy and theory all day long.
Yeah.
People use these words, you don't even know what they mean.
The word conspiracy theory got invented by the CIA for people who were questioning what they were doing.
Yeah.
And since then, anybody who questions the narrative of anything is labeled instantly as a conspiracy theorist. And we have been conditioned to think conspiracy theorists are some sort of crazy person sat in their house with a tinfoil hat on, rocking, preparing for doomsday, you know, and that's not what it's about. We have researched, investigated this sex education, and we have found a conspiracy, and we are now trying to tell you all about it.
We were one of the last countries in the world to get it. People just have to go over the other side of the Seventh Bridge and open their eyes.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're not going to give up on this, and we're not going to we're not going to back down.
No, and that's why we're doing it. And again, it's just so important now. We're at the Senedd this Friday at the Senedd. But just to quickly to say that Friday isn't just about this sex education. It's about our government and their failure to protect and safeguard our children, full stop. I've only opened the paper again today to another report of self-harming injuries, suicide attempts, overdoses, asphyxiation, self-asphyxiation in hospitals right now, where hospital apparently 1 to 2 a week would be the average, and now they're experiencing 1 to 2 a day of children coming into hospital like this. Our children are, a huge majority of our children are having their childhood ruined, and it is going to F up their adulthood.
Adele, the childhood is such a small window of opportunity for anything. This is an entire
small window that controls and influences the rest of your life.
Yeah.
People need to understand the seriousness of childhood trauma, even what you and how many people don't even realize they've experienced a childhood trauma. But for some people, then they experience many of these traumas. And what children are living through has been trauma for near a year now.
Yeah.
Full on.
A year is a long time for a child. A year is, if you look at a 6-month-old and look at an 18-month-old, look at the difference between them. That's a long time for a child.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, they've gone from barely sitting up to walking around talking.
Yeah.
Almost ready for potty training in the space of a year. It's so crucial. A year is crucial to a child's development, no matter how old they are. It's as simple as that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's not even just children. Again, emotional development is not fully developed. Your emotional responses, your emotional maturity, it's not fully developed until you were 25.
No.
So even now, for those who are in their early 20s that might be struggling with this is already, and you would think that you're fully developed at this side neurologically, when actually this is altering your emotional responses.
Yeah.
And the development, the final development, the kind of the tying up the loose end stage of your neurological development. So at that crucial stage of wrapping up all those you've got a massive emotional trauma like this on top.
Please do a video on
People need to get behind with. We're hearing about the science. Follow the science, follow the science, follow the science. What about some of the psychology science in all of this? What about the economic science now in all of this? We listen to the virus science. There's no evidence, still no peer review evidence of anything that supports these lockdown measures.
Yeah.
Yet we have got psychologists.
Where is that impact statement? Why haven't they published that impact statement? That's what we want to be outside the Senate on Friday. We want that impact statement.
What we do have is scientists saying that this is causing masses of damage to
irreparable damage.
Psychologists are saying that this is of a national emergency, the damage being done to our children right now.
Yeah, Jason, just to pick up on you, but I said, yeah, but my daughter knows everything. It was different when I was a teenager, apparently. Yeah, she's right. It was different. There was a little bit less indoctrination in the schools.
Filtered, it was getting there.
A little bit less rights and a lot more responsibility, Jason. You know, and I think the balance has gone there. It's with rights come responsibility, but I see all these rights coming. I don't see anyone taking any responsibility for any of it.
Yeah. I think it's nearly time for us to go in a moment, Kim. So I hope that people will see this now and do some research themselves. You have done videos now, you've linked them, you've referenced them in future videos. There's actually a website called stopthekinseyinstitute.org, which is brilliant and full of information in the influences that Kinsey has gained. And as you said, even more information is Judith Reisman. Have I said her name right now?
Yeah.
She is the one who exposed all of this in the first place. She's done research paper after research paper on it. There's articles galore. This woman is knowledge on this, on the sex education.
It became her life, didn't it? It became her life for 40 years, you know, and when it becomes your life, that's the people you need to look at. These people as well, they got no conflict of interest, and that's what you need to look for, conflict of interest. Who funded their studies?
Yeah.
And if they're a good academic, they'll have a bio, and they will tell you in their bio their conflicts of interest, you know. And it's these kind of questions you need to ask. Who funded this paper? Why are they doing it? You know, the reasons behind it. Those are the questions you need to ask. Don't just read things.
Well, I just want to touch, because it wanders off, but we're saying about the who's and the what's and the, you know, obviously again with the UNESCO and how this is connected to, and I know you to be scared to say too much, because it sounds so out there, like people go, oh my God, what are they talking about? But even that all of this is linked to Planned Parenthood. Yeah. And you've got to look at where Planned Parenthood come from. And Planned Parenthood came from the eugenics movement. And I just want to say then you've got Julian Huxley. Again, how does this all fit in? So you've got Planned Parenthood, who came from the eugenics movement, which was found, again, another founder was Bill Gates's father. But then you've got Julian Huxley. He was the first general director of UNESCO. Now, like I said, every name that I keep coming across, I got to then have a research. And who is Julian Huxley? Well, he is a massive member of the eugenics movement. He's published papers on the vital importance of eugenics. And the prohibition of marriage, of the family unit. He wants the segregation of institutes and sterilization. And again, these are the directors. So you've got all ideologies, are all the people that are involved in founding the companies, are the very companies that are giving you this global sex education.
They want to protect your children.
So it is, look at the people involved.
They've taken research from sexual predators to prove your children are sexual beings so they can protect them from sexual predators.
Yeah.
That's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, absolutely. So
another good night again.
Yeah, it's time for us to go.
Thanks for everyone. Gwyneth, Joe, who we got? Gwyneth, Joe, Alan, Sandy, Jason, Jeffrey, anyone else? I'm sure we've seen somebody else earlier on as well. Laura.
Yes, thank you everyone.
Thanks for watching, guys, much appreciated. And Jason, again, thanks for the platform. You are a legend.
Yes, absolutely brilliant. Thank you. Good night all.
Bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.